Please stand.
Atana hatta na komit mani takut mirta ngaita kay magalut suda nuna hatigi itu magalut suda katigi teo meyu subuli pa na komit amalo atana hatta atata bo hiu atata bo hela meduti ati ismagitya tawle atane uni hailoni yumade pinyak tawle nunami show holami ulumi picturing to Punginu, Ismail, so Ubago, Bewuti, Ismail, all to town that you know, put in a trap, beautifully, Bewuti. Ateneuni, as you hang in low, in a Hotsani low, Bewuti, showing it about. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Your information item, the main doors are to the left and to the right. Third door to this corner is emergency exit. Your receivers, if they are not working, people can help you indicate if they're not working. They'll come over and adjust your headset. During this meeting, starting tomorrow, we start at 9 to 12. 1:30 to 4:30, 60 minutes, 9 to 9 o'clock in the evening. The washrooms are located adjacent to the main doors. The invited participants and to the presenters will be seated at the front. If you have cell phone, turn them off. We like you to turn your cell phone off or put them on mute. And for your information, the documents, the agenda for this meeting who are not able to attend, they have selected to be at the public hearings in their own region. Nunavut Kavamay, Nunavut Abatilagayi, Paula Houston, Inutagong na Nunavut Makitagong Nangi Katimayi or group, Kachangmiut Regional Wildlife Kibalang Minui Katu Chakatigingi Kibalay Northquest Ltd, Agnico Eagle, Arriva Resources Canadami, North Arrow Minerals, Nunabumi Imalagayit, Nunabumi Abatilagayit. This morning we had a collect ceremony which we will skip tonight. And we will go through introduction. I'm Andrew Nakashuk. I'm from Pangnektok and chair of the Nunavut Planning Commission. I have been with NPC for 4 years and just one over a year as a chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, youth, elders. Percy Kablunak from Will Cove. I'm being with NPC with my third term. Kuya Namik, thank you. Nunavut, fellow Nunavut, thank you. Nice to see you. Saliangnak, Wakambi. I've been with Planning Commission for the last 10 years. I was appointed by Qikiqtani. I am Putulik Papikatuk. I was here when this organization was established in 1996. I've been with Nunavut Planning Commission since then. I'm with Nunavut Impact Review Board, Nunavut Water Board. I've been appointed by Qikiqtani, and I've been with this group since I was appointed to these boards. I'm from Saluit, Nunavut. Thank you. I am Peter Alaveak from Akviet. I've been with Nunavut Planning Commission for 9 years. Good evening. Ubiti Alakanok Kugaruk. I've been with the Planning Commission for 6 years, going on to 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the people who were here today and to the new delegates that just came in. My name is Sharon Qikiqtani. I'm the Executive Director of the Planning Commission. I've been with the Commission since 2006. I'm going to introduce all of our staff and support staff so you know who they are, and for the delegates that just arrived over the next couple days, if you need any help, any of our staff are available to assist you. Brian Aglukak. Brian is our Director of Policy and Planning, and Brian's been with the Commission for 21 years. Pretty exciting. Ryan Mason. Ryan is the Executive Assistant to all the Directors and our Office Administrator for all 3 of the Commission offices. Jonathan Qikiqtani. Jonathan's our Manager of IT. Jonathan Savoy, our Manager of Implementation. Peter Schultz is our Senior Planner based in our Arviat office. Alana Vigna is our Senior Planner based in the Cambridge Bay office. Gump Dijole is our Senior Planner based in Iqaluit. Al Thompson, straight in front of me by the time clock, is our planner based in Iqaluit. Hugh Nutila, where's Hugh? Hugh is our development technician, use and occupancy mapper. Annie Oli, Annie is over around the corner. I think as you came in, most of you met her. She's our interpreter, translator, mapper, and administrator out of the Arviat office. Tommy Olajut is translating in the booth. Tommy is our interpreter translator. Doreen is behind in the French translation booth. Jared Fraser over there. Jared is our GIS land technician based in Iqaluit. Sohail Deham is our GIS technician in Cambridge Bay. Our support staff and our contract staff that are working with us, we have Daniel Carriere, who's doing French translation for us. Henry Okanawak. Henry is doing translations in Inuktitut. John Mezoloff is our audio technician. David Livingstone David is external consultant advisor to the commission. Steve Kennett, another external consultant advisor. Our legal counsel, Alan Blair, and Shane Utter-Hopkins. Just had to make sure you were there, Shane. Our videographer, Willie Puslod, and David Butzelli behind the camera. Jazz Aikens is our stenographer over at the table. And we have Lena Evik and her team. I think Samo is back there, if you can, and Lena in the back corner. They're there to support you, and they picked the delegates up, Al and Ryan, so I'm glad everybody is here. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Sharon.
We welcome you who have just arrived. We started this morning, and I'm glad you are finally able to join us. We have a short video presentation for you prepared on Nunavut planning consultation during the last trips we had over the months. You can proceed and get on with the video presentation.
A long journey begins with a single step. The great migratory caribou herds have embodied this philosophical proverb. Their journey is a difficult one, fraught with many challenges. Their seasonal migrations are a testament to their resilience.
The only way to survive in the north, you have to be strong. We look for ptarmigan. We also hunt Arctic hare in the fall. When I was growing up, there was always caribou.
Andrew Nakashuk is the chair of the Nunavut Planning Commission. Like the caribou, the NPC is also navigating a challenging path, a path towards a Nunavut land use plan.
Nunavut is a very big land. There are different opinions here and there. It's very eye-opening for me. It is. From what I have learned, you can't always satisfy everybody individual person. There's going to be some disagreement here and there for sure. But we are trying our best. It's a very big task to do.
Perspective is something Paul Kwasa has an abundance of, having been a key figure in the evolution of the territory. The Nunavut education minister has worn very many hats during his career. He was one of the signatories to the historic 1993 Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. His perspective on the journey towards a land use plan.
Amma tukisi siman mata ajigin min mata kamak ko tusak taw yari nunagi ya taman na ajigin min man nagjuti wudlo ajigin min tuti amma taman na imam atok taw atok tilu ajigin katane man taman na ili talayaw ni manuta semua pangnay kun ajigin min ningin mita ko ay tosimayui nunabon ni taman na kanpa pijitigin yo ko tusaka swapti nama tukut tusaka semeyu ajigi itu atok patul kama tulingan nuna tulidu ima
kaputat ika
Nunavut has the youngest population in Canada with a median age of 23. The hope is for this generation of children to enjoy a culturally and economically prosperous future. The key, according to Kwasa, are the Inuit guiding principles of IQ.
Is a very important guiding principle. Taman na ida ang katya sa maguni sugro taksisimatsia tuni ini kawin maya kapanenyo amar tamakko uyak neo mayo kanwe yo mayo nakini tamakko akitsia semayumi sakiti nakpada so rupangai ko kinuwa ganya to tukisisimatsia na mada ida tamanna ini kawin maya kapanenyo ila posingillo ili taliya simayo tsianya tu uyak nyati pigi aku lagi kamane sakitnya kalau itu kan itu baru dia mau nanya tu si unik sakitnya pinjau tinggi taman Nunavut ajimin man amma ajimin ni ane rutin baru ni dua sakit sakit semua
Ino sa kalaktugon, akago, ino kaningaman itugo, balik to tigolo may dapit singin. Amma, ilisaga kalaw itugo, ulo ito, ilo ko silini, kasi yan ilikakamatya, ilipaliangin na kalaw itugo. Amma, ikaw mayak ka, kung yan ako lang sa meditation.
Up to age 10, Lena Evick's journeys were by dog sled or boat. The McGill University educated teacher, innovator, and singer of children's songs is now leading a journey of rediscovery through the foundation of an Inuit Learning Center.
Pero itong nagkakapok, isumat ilog ko ito kanyan. Ito takano ako may kisiyani Inuit o kasingani, ilog ko singani ang makinaninan. Ininya si manara ulumi mo, bato si simabo, amisini, kapani, tayo maokawang nakon. Tayo may lawin tuma, mana inay kumikananinan. Ulumi, tako ba po nga sa natun at sa mamuni, makutuni, ilawin nila. Piko ilawin patakka, makutuni, ulumi. Pika nakutupo pang medyo balwad, tayo may simayin na bata. Ang makinubami, tayo mailapos kasi alin makaulo may tignan ng mga faktor yako sila kalabutan na so alin ni kasi sipalaman
1.9 million square kilometers of land, a vast economic potential, sensitive and unique Arctic wildlife and habitat, pristine freshwater reserves, thousands of kilometers of marine coastline, a challenging but not impossible task to balance the protection of wildlife and habitat while building strong economic opportunities for Nunavut.
I want to see a good future of Nunavut. My name is Charlie Arnold. I was born in Peninsula, Waken Bay. I was born on an island that is right in the mouth of the Louis. We are very conservation-minded about our animals.
Charlie Arnkat and Kutulik Papaketu were two of the signatories of the historic James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement. It was a major turning point in Nunavut's history.
From my experience in the past, negotiation of Northern Quebec Agreement, also negotiating with mining companies, I'm strongly suggesting that Inuit and Nunavut should work together. The government itself, another organization work together.
Blocking exploration and mining activities when there is no scientific link to the decline of caribou would unnecessarily compromise the development of other opportunities for Nunavut and Nunavut.
We have to have development and protection together. It cannot be separate. If not, it will hurt for the long time and long term the Nunavut.
Our participation will focus on caribou as it has since the beginning.
It's definitely a complex issue and not one that I envy the NPC to take on, but one that I think we can achieve by working together. I think there's a balance to be struck. I think given that it's a living document, given the current status of caribou across the territory, it would be wise to take a precautionary approach at this juncture.
We are heading into the pre-hearing regional engagement sessions. And I think I get a sense of excitement. We're hearing directly from the communities. We've heard from all our planning partners. This is actually where my mom and dad lived when they moved up here in the early 80s. Cambridge Bay is my home. We really have the best of both worlds. We have our guidance from our elders up here, which is very important.
We're not going to get ready for your children and my children.
We're now going to 6 communities. It's kind of the last sprint to the finish. It's not a plan for the institutions. It really, truly is a plan for the people.
It's work in progress. In Dene, we are called Tandana, the Caribou eaters. The Caribou is our goal to the Dene people. We are the land users. We are the hunters. We are the harvesters.
Naloner tau si mayo tikwak tau si mayo lone takwa. Ta na panglaw tisak pingas wiling ayone naloner si simavo. Ilang itsaputi yaw si mayo amalo itok tau loting awla tau yarialit zorlo kay tario sukutingi nokangat yu tau bekakto ukiyo iloani taima naloner tau mayo.
Maka tayo kuninga nanamuan ito tinuta ulumi undangan daw kasi walang nakan na tabi daw nga.
Sila ubani keko ako kaya mituwa yung
Karena udah yang sana sini waktu itu nunggu mereka udah sakit udah pindah waktu itu udah jadi people that want to make unity to listen to mata amal itu pada nung meeting masih berupa usia tanpa na pamai di kau bila sama tengah udah ada hal-hal apa minum minum saya ada.
Taman itu aku mau cakap pamai kun mencari betul yang masih mak kata mau ingin nak yung kamagitian itu nak terserah untuk amat ni ajigai itu ni.
It's been a long time in the making. I kind of get the hope that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. It's flickering right now, and as people say, that light could be a train. Who knows? But it's within reach.
Dako nila mag-group at cutting at chair on the chair too. Kata ini taksi si macam ni, teman ini kaya macam tu kami lo, amma ini ilat kusinga. Ini tadi yang chair ni, teman uyar ni yang sudah uyar perlu ni, pihak dia yang pada tak kau cutting at chair apa tu. Karena biju tinggi dua tu, so lo, teman dia yang ikuti, ikut nana, angin asal ni, teman awal baca ni, awal baca ni,
and like
If everything's worked out well, it's a very good turning point for Nunavut. It is. It will be. Thinking positively that our children, grandchildren will be still working together on this in the future with both the land use plan for Nunavut and Nunavik.
Looking forward is what Andrew Nakashuk is doing, figuratively and literally. He has a drone, and he uses it as a tool to prevent him from getting stuck on broken sea ice when he's hunting.
I'm going to use the drone to make it hover above me and watch the screen and to see which path is the right path to take. So I won't get stuck that much.
And the NPC chair says, like the drone, the draft Nunavut land use plan is also a navigational tool.
During that path, I'm sure there's going to be some obstacles too, and you'll be able to change, just like when you're trying to go between guys that when you have to make a turn or make a change, over time, things change. And we can still use the provisions in the Nunavut Land Rights Agreement. This agreement was meant not just for the present population, but for our future generations. And that is why it is so very important to be seen and be understood that it's a living agreement.
The purpose of a land use plan
shall be to protect and promote
Mana sigunitin nino makinganinga nakatigi.
Amaruta ko nunali kapani Nunavut Iluan.
taking into account the interests of all Canadians.
And to protect and where necessary.
To restore the environmental integrity
of the Nunavut settlement area.
Thank you, Willie and David, for the wonderful video. I welcome you all on behalf of the Commission. We have 3 parts: public hearing, 2016 draft land use plan. And at that time, we went through a consultation. For many years, we have worked on this. Tamna Nunavut Inuit Nunangitni ataw huyumi nunab atong narinaktangi aki kimalekto tayo mapianik padelikpok. Tamna pangnayikot aki taw himayo hakiti taw himayot Nunavut agreement. Aki kuikop lugit Inuit Nunangitni amataman na sinagi baktanga Nunavut Nunalo imaklo tamakwa ihumagiyawiyot imat nao kakimayok tam na nuna atong narinyaktanga aki kuiyok mianak hiblo nilo aki yakti sinakto tako nga hakimayunik hibuniptinot inga katsyakup lugo nuna bumiyunot nuna ring nulotag pa ni Inuit Nunangatni. Tam na ihamagiyaw lugo ukwa ujagayaw katakup lugo Canada miyutay. Tam na miyanagayaw ni aktok akikaw himalunilo. Tam na abatip awla ni nga uba ni Inuit Nunangatni. Takwa ilaw yut, katimayak to kataw yut, imat na ukaktuluang niakpot, nuna akaw nginanga hakikpat akikwe kataw lutik. Takwa maligakti yut, atoga kakayak tut, nuna akikong ninganut, ukwa ilaw yaga kaktut, kamisyon ko takwa ujaga hugdute akikugo ng magtako mga nuna atong nakanyak tanginik. Aki kimayuta ko nuna atong nakanyakta nga miligaw niyak to atugaw yumayudlo takwa ilaw katawlaw tutungawik ko kabamatukay amanunabo kabamay. Tam na tita kimayo ukuni nga aki kuy himayo nuna atong nakanyakta nga ukuang yutalimat atawhek hangilak tichiluni ilagik tunik pinahatigik tunik to makwa ujagalugit may nakalugilo abati 3 makwa ikayoktok lugit akikuinit nuna mekanot 4 akikuinit nuna ring nut atuchangnik inuchangnik kut talimata kwa ikayoktok lugit pinagalugit taman na pibaldi anyo hakinyakinyak tanga takwa ujagnak tut nun akikuinit maligaw ni akto takwalu upagaw yumayot pianigaw yumayot ukuna nga kamisak kunut pianigyak lugit takwa to how manitik maliglugit takwa kami syakut katimayi ukuninga atong niakpot inulimanik nalak tisinikut kauyiyak lutik ubaloni amma apekoti tita kimayutigo atok lugit keo katak lugit nunap atok nakanyak tanganut. Taima kami syakut katimayi ukuninga pianik himayon ni tunihinyak nunap atong nakanyak tangi tungawikut kabamatukay nunabo kabamay tam na pianik himalekpat maligaw yaka kaumak tokta ko tita kimaningi maliglugit tam na pinagakayaw ni akto kau yahaklutig lununanik ato kumayangata maligaktiwot ato lang ni akto mikta ko kami pangnayikot nunabot atok pagtangi maligaliok tiyo waktut atugay atok lugit takwa kami syakut ukuninga pinagayang uyakto na kau yahaklutik ilakaklutik nunabumi awatilagayit nunabumi imalagayit amatamakko timiyuyut pekoyana akikuyi waktut. Amna kami syakut ukuninga nutani to haktamitnik atok lutik akikuy tuinak niaktut ublumimut akikimalugu mali atok yaklugi tamakko nunabumiyut makko ihumalugu tigiyay Ujjagilugit inuhek pibalenek ama abati ahilyak paleninga. Takwa taymanya matahimo na kayaptin ungahik tumut Thomas R. Berger iman au kalaw kimayok. Inuit nunangat ang iyualo Canada nuna mali tautuklugo. Tam na inuit nunangat ingmigut nunakyang mi nunawlok pat ingunayak to angin nakataw nayak tanga. Ukiyo na amihon itaman na pilagayaw laktut nunap atok na kayumak tanga akiko kimayok. Takwa ujjagayaw lugit nalang niuniyak tut ang makanuin ningit tamang milu tamakwa pilagay siyang lugit nunap atok na kanyak tanga uminga ukang kaktok hunalo hibuliw niya mga tahak kanyak tulo inong nutpiyaw yumayut nuna bumiyot kawamat makuninga timiyaw yunik ikpingnang niku aktuin niyak putamani nuna kakto ni tam na nuna bumi agreement akikuy ni pilagayang yunik pekoyak imat na pekoyak mat kakwa pang naikot inulimanik to ho matitsinak po nalaglutiglo ta kumanunap atong nakayumak na katamikanot tayo makamisikot amiho pilay hatalak to tamakko hibuliw niya mga ta ukiunik topnik pilagayaw lakto ta ko kami pang naikot ni pilagayot na ito walwak lugit itakak palilaktot nunaling nulo aw lakpaksutik to ho mahawak to takanuin niya mga tabatam na hakahimalak po kanito niya mga akikimayo 2060 minunap atong na kanyak nga akikokimayok ama katimayi tamakko nga upigo huktut ikayulok to ni taman na hakinilak ti nunap atong na kanyak nga nalo ukunin nga udyang naktunik takutit sinyak so ni okaw hekalo nilo katimayit tako kanok mga ta akikokimayumut imatam nalo ikayong nakangayak to kami syakut ako ilaw pata uwani piyaw ni aktunik namang ni maliglugit so na mga ta udyang naktutamani ila mana upiguhong na matam na inuit kawin mayo to ka nga maliglugo inu to kailo mani haum talakpim ni ikibayo pijutigip yuwit katimayak toktot nagbatakwa katima inuit katimayak to katawiyut kawin mayo minyo kakayak toktot ilak ko hingit maliglugit takwa pangnayikut pekoyakut imat na pekoyawiyut Ujjako huglo ti akay kuyawiyut makkualo inu kawimaya to kange atok lugit ta makkualo kawimaya kuwit ilangi kauyahang ni atokuyo blotik inuit kauyimaya tokai lutak atau chiko atokuya kang neak tu tamakko akikuo lugit kanuil niak ningi kami sekut ukununga innang nut tohau maningi hibulak pare niak tay apekutil lutap ko ki okatang lugit tam na ujere niak para okau hiuyok nunali katimayak tok tukote takwa kami sekut tamachumingan nunaling ni katimayak tok tuni ilaw ko yubut katimanang mut. Takwa kamisino okao tibak kuyan nami ako aksugi katimayulok himayut pilagayulok himayulo tamakwa lo pilagatak himayut nunabumi takalingitay naksuti akikuilaw himagami nunap atulaw mangninganik kanuinya mangat. Tam na katima New York aula taw niyak po pang naikot maligari niyak tangi atok lugit kanuinya mga tam na katima New York kanokdo ingi kaniyak mangat. Ay matam na toharap tigo kami siku imay tut umingalupi umayot uwani nalang nakme. Uwani katimayon tam na imay niyak tok katimayak tok tut innay amma nalagyak tok himayo kanuinya mga ta kanuinya ngilo ihumagiyay nunap atong narinig tanganut kami siku tam nirayugibahan. Uwani nalagtisinyak tu abik tok himayo ni pingahonik unalo upinaktu mad inuit tamakwa unikak tuang nikut petkohi tay may kaluak ti yu aperayut kiglakak tumik o kaktitaw katang niyak po takwalo katimayit katimayak to katimayi imat na ukuninga atako yut apekoti mikha no unalo hibuliw niyak pat katimayak tok tunut tay ma kami syakut pilariyi uwani katimanang mi ilaw kataw niyak tut ukwalo apekotaw niyak tut ing migut kiyo katarluit apekoktaw niyak tu ikibaw tamut tap kwalo katimadjutaw niyak tu apekulang nakpata wamanamik tu niyaw himaniyak tutit apekaniyak narubi imat na atit okakdo amma nanang miutok mga kbitam na nalunagyak tang nakpahi mana ape ila apekutihi kiw kautigini ayok naruptigi kiw yaw yumak putitak katigulunit apekayulo ang niyak tuti apekayumayak nik tamakwa kimero yaw yumak matakatimanik pata apekutilo kiw yaw lutik takwa katimayit ukuni katimayak toktonik apekokuyiniak put ilang ititak katigo apekutaw lutit takwa katimanak nalang ni pingahuno abik tokhimaniak titakagaw tiyaklo nilo takwa ihumariyatit ukawahigit kaniruman na titak katigut makut uwat tuniyudluang niya kahi ihumariyaw yumak mata takwa katimanik pata nalaktichianik pata ukawahiriyaw niyak tut taima takwa katimayit ukadyangit tut apekutawuni ukawahikarlu tiglunit mana ukakaniwak tungata kumaujak nang ningagut uwani aulanibut ila takwa titaktaw himayu ilaw niyak tut makuninga ukawahiri niyak tamitnik apekutay kiglakang niyak put apekutay luni kiglakang lutik takwa nailuang na makatimaniunak Taima katimayak toktang niyak, katimagyak tang niyak tu ublakut na imuarangat. Tuamut amma takwa katimajuti kauyut Malichang nyak pabut man neriuk punga katimayak tokto tamakuna atoria kaktonik nalachia kublugit. Tema uwani okaong naktutit. Nunagaya hitap kwa pijuti api nunap atong naganya kan ujar nakto matap kwa katimayit nalaktut. Kanok tam na akiya kang nakpa at kikok himayok. Tamakwa lo ujar nang ito hakitsyak tang nek mata aulatsyak nikut o kau titigut nunabumi umuyuhi Canada Mule ati ibig.
This morning we had a brief break, and since we don't want to go too late, we will continue right on to the presentations. Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to welcome everyone again. This is the first, as the chair said, of the 3 public hearings on the Nunavut Land Use Plan. And the Commission has been waiting for this moment and for the start of the hearings for almost a decade. The presentation will provide a general overview of the land use planning in the Nunavut settlement area, discuss how the Nunavut Agreement guides planning in Nunavut, and then review the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan for the rest of the evening. The presentation is divided into 11 sessions that review all topics covered by the Land Use Plan. We also will respond to any questions on the topics after each sessions. The Nunavut Agreement created a co-management regulatory system that provides residents with opportunities to participate in regulatory decisions for resource use and development. The Nunavut Planning Commission is the gatekeeper of the regulatory system in the Nunavut settlement area, which means that proponents wishing to carry out activities in the territory must first submit a proposal to the Nunavut Planning Commission to determine if the activities conform to the requirements of an approved land use plan. We call this process a conformity determination. If the proposed land use is supported by the plan, it may then be considered by other institutes of public government. Land use plans prepared by the Nunavut Planning Commission do not apply to traditional Inuit land use activities such as hunting, fishing, and camping. Also, most activities within municipalities are not subject to the Commission's land use plans. Within municipal boundaries, the Commission's land use plans only apply to certain projects such as industrial use, including the deposit of waste or the bulk storage of fuel. John?
I'll go, Sharon. Thank you. Regional planning improves certainty for investors, project, and environment, increases the rate by which impact assessment and other regulatory assessments can be processed, and reduces risk of conflicts over land. By establishing what is important to protect before development occurs, we can learn about these things before development pressures arise, which gives more time to develop understanding. We can consider social, economic, and wellness effects in a coordinated fashion from the start, instead of asking proponents to do so in a piecemeal fashion for every project. The result is protection for areas that need it, but also more efficient and predictable results for development companies, as well as easier social license. Planning can also provide greater certainty to industry by identifying the mixed-use areas where development that follows standard regulatory procedures is not likely to conflict with other important values. Establishing conditions that development must comply with in order to be acceptable in more sensitive special management areas will also give industry greater certainty when deciding whether or not to invest in these areas. Chair.
The Nunavut Planning Commission creates land use plans in coordination with all other planning partners. This is an opportunity for participants to be heard, and the NPC takes its responsibility to listen carefully, very seriously. The Commission staff has put a draft plan before you and the Commissioners. Your comments are not only welcome, but they are essential to moving the planning process forward to the approved land use plan for Nunavut. The Commission acknowledges the written and oral comments received to date and would like to emphasize that the purpose of this public hearing is to hear from you. It is a forum primarily for you to speak and for the Commissioners to hear what you have to say.
In Nunavut, land use planning is built into a constitutionally protected document. The Nunavut Agreement provides fundamental guidance on how the Commission must conduct land use planning and the factors it must consider. The Nunavut Agreement, Section 10, sets up 3 levels or filters to protect assessment. The land use planning filter is handled by the Nunavut Planning Commission. It looks at the broadest perspective. It considers regions, ecosystems, and the territory as a whole. The intention is that regional planning will be guided by Inuit Qayamatoqangi, IQ, and identify key factors of concern and consideration. The environmental assessment filter looks at individual projects and is handled by the Nunavut Impact Review Board, with key factors of concern identified by the Nunavut Planning Commission and eventually ecological baselines and thresholds articulated. The NERB looks in depth at the impacts of the proposed projects, their mitigation strategies, and recommends terms and conditions. The water licensing filter is handled by the Nunavut Water Board. The NWB looks in detail at chemical and physical impacts to water in Nunavut to ensure the quality of water in streams and in lakes.
In brief, planning ensures that any development fits the long-term, high-level vision of Nunavut. Environmental assessment looks at proposals to ensure development has minimal negative or maximum positive impacts to ecosystems, communities, and the economy. And water licensing looks closely at factors that impact water quality and quantity.
In Nunavut, the North Baffin and the Keewatin regional land use plans were approved in 2000 and have been in effect for almost 17 years. These plans are still being implemented today. Starting in 2004, the Commission conducted over 300 interviews to collect use and occupancy mapping information throughout the territory. Use and occupancy mapping has identified how residents of our Nunavut communities use the land and areas of importance to the communities. The draft Nunavut land use plan started being developed in 2007, following the approval of the broad planning policies, objectives, and goals that were developed in collaboration with the Government of Nunavut, the Government of Canada, and MTI. In 2007, the Commission began gathering information and talking to people, hamlets, and other stakeholders about their priorities for a draft Nunavut-wide land use plan. In 2008, the NPC developed research reports on wildlife habitat, economic activity, community infrastructure requirements, and demographic information. Throughout 2009, this compilation of information was further refined by working with planning partners to identify specific issues and priorities that should be addressed in a draft Nunavut land use plan. A priority areas map was publicly distributed in 2010, requesting feedback on areas and issues that had been identified, and held technical workshops with planning partners. This information informed a series of working draft plans between 2010 and 2011. In 2012, the NPC publicly released the first version of the draft plan. Between late 2012 and early 2014, the Nunavut Planning Commission consulted with over 30 communities twice in Nunavut, Nunavik, Northern Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. The key message we heard was that Nunavummiut were mainly concerned with food security, especially country food, continued access to clean water, and there being enough jobs for youth. In June 2014, the Nunavut Planning Commission released a second draft plan. 2015 to 2016, the NPC held 4 technical meetings to discuss parts of the plan that required more attention. These discussions and additional written submissions led to the further revised version in June 2016. In late 2016, the new draft plan was presented to representatives from all communities in Nunavut and the surrounding areas in 6 separate regional pre-hearing conferences and regional community feedback sessions. Participants filed expert reports in 2016, and written comments were received in early 2017. Sure.
Next steps and the public hearing. The NPC's 3 regional public hearings will be an opportunity for participants and communities to provide oral feedback and written submissions on the draft plan in a public setting in accordance with the requirements of the Nunavut Agreement. After the public hearings, the commissioners will consider making appropriate revisions to the plan before submission for approval by the Government of Canada, the Government of Nunavut, and Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated. The Nunavut Land Use Plan will remain a living document. Following the approval of the document, a new planning cycle will begin, allowing the Nunavut Land Use Plan to evolve through plan amendments and periodic reviews, respond to emerging issues, changing circumstances, and the evolving values and priorities of the people of Nunavut and all planning partners.
Inuit Koyame Tokangit, IQ. The Nunavut Land Use Plan values the information provided through IQ. The collection and transfer of IQ into the plan has been the main focus of the Nunavut Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, during the planning process, this was done in 4 ways: the use and occupancy mapping projects, community visits and in-depth interviews with Inuit on the current use of the land, community consultations, written input from communities and individuals, and literary research.
The draft Nunavut Land Use Plan has been structured based on the goals identified in the 2007 Broad Planning Policies, Objectives, and Goals document. Chapter 1 of the plan coincides with the first goal, strengthening partnership and institutions. Chapter 2, with protecting and sustaining the environment. Chapter 3, with encouraging conservation planning. Chapter 4, with building healthier communities. Chapter 5, with encouraging sustainable economic development. And Chapter 6 deals with the implementation of the plan. Each chapter will be discussed this evening. Chapters 2 to 5 of the draft plan identify issues that are important in specific geographic areas and assign one of 3 land use designations to each area. The draft plan also includes maps, tables, and annexes at the back. Schedule A divides Nunavut into many numbered areas, and Table 1 identifies the prohibited uses and conditions that apply in each numbered area. There are a few important terms that the plan uses to manage land use. Prohibited uses identify land uses that do not conform to the plan. This means that any activity that is listed as a prohibited use in a given area would not be permitted. Conditions identify requirements such as setbacks or seasonal restrictions. Protected areas are shown in green on Schedule A and are identified with green text boxes throughout the plan. Protected areas prohibit particular land uses that are incompatible with certain environmental or cultural values. They can also include conditions to guide land use. This is the most restrictive land use designation to development, but more protective of traditional uses and wildlife. In these areas, uses such as mineral exploration and production, oil and gas, quarries, and linear infrastructure are often prohibited. Protected area designations represent approximately 16% of the area where the draft plan would apply. This does not include established parks. Some participants have recommended that the term protected area be changed because it may be confused with how the phrase is used in other jurisdictions to refer to areas established through legislation. Special management areas are shown in yellow-tan on Schedule A and are identified with yellow-tan text boxes throughout the plan. Special management areas usually involve conditions such as setbacks or seasonal restrictions to guide land users, but in some cases they may have prohibited uses related to non-environmental or cultural values, such as contaminated sites. Special management areas are typically a moderately restrictive land use designation. An example is beluga calving grounds, which are designated as special management areas. There are no prohibited land uses in these areas. However, there are seasonal restrictions on ship traffic. Special management areas represent approximately 3% of the area where the draft plan would apply. And finally, mixed-use land use designations are shown as gray on Schedule A and are identified with gray text boxes throughout the plan. Mixed-use areas do not have prohibited uses or conditions, but may include values for the NPC, regulatory authorities, and all land users to consider when a project is to be carried out in those areas. Mixed-use land use designations support a wide variety of opportunities and land uses and represent approximately 81% of the area where the draft plan would apply. It should be noted that the requirements of an approved land use plan, including designations, are not permanent features. They may be changed or removed over time through a variety of processes that will be discussed later this evening. The draft plan also includes recommended actions for some issues. These are included in blue text boxes in the plan and are summarized in Annex C at the back. Schedule B of the draft plan identifies areas important to certain valued ecosystem components and valued socioeconomic components. This information can be used by regulatory authorities during the review of project proposals and by the Commission to determine if there are concerns regarding the cumulative impacts of projects. Valued ecosystem components, or VECs for short, are part of the natural environment that have particular value. These could be wildlife species, like polar bear, or habitat, like a flow edge. Valued socioeconomic components, or VSECs for short, are parts of our culture, society, or economy that have particular value. These could be resources such as minerals, jobs, carving stone, or community drinking water. Schedule B1 presents terrestrial values, including polar bear denning areas, areas of high mineral potential, proposed or speculative highways, or others. Schedule B2, which is not currently shown on the screen, presents some seasonal ranges for caribou. Schedule B3 presents marine values, such as areas important to char or turbot, or polynyas, or others. There is also a separate options and recommendations document that was prepared to inform the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. It references information that was considered and includes maps of important areas that have been identified for each issue.
Some protected areas and special management areas, particularly marine areas, have seasonal restrictions. They do not apply year-round. Seasonal restrictions in the land use plan are based on Inuit seasonal cycles and systems because they differ greatly from other parts of Canada. There are 6 seasons in Nunavut. However, start and end dates differ from region to region. This table, which is also in the plan, sets out the calendar dates which are applied to the 6 Inuit seasons for 7 different parts of Nunavut: the east and west Qikiqtani, the north and south Kivalak, the north and south Qikiqtani, and Sanikilwa. Although Inuit-owned lands do not have an exclusive section in the 2016 draft plan, it is important to discuss this issue because some participants are concerned that the draft plan proposes restrictions on how these lands should be used in some cases. Suggestions were made to revise the 2016 draft plan to recognize that many Iowa parcels were selected predominantly for their mineral endowment, and in particular, that IOL subsurface parcels should be excluded from designations that prohibit mineral exploration and development. Another recommendation was that most land use designations with prohibited uses that include IOL should either exclude those parcels or be designated as special management areas. The table on the screen identifies the percentage of overlap between surface and subsurface IOL and land use designations that contain prohibited uses or conditions. The next chart is a breakdown of community, or by community. Communities with the highest percentage of surface IOL and protected area overlap are Rankin Inlet at 77%, Joe Haven at 70%, and Will Cove at 55%. Communities with the highest percentage of subsurface IOL and protected area overlap are Sanikiloch at 100% and Will Cove at 60%. In the Qikiqtani region, protected areas cover 7% of surface IOL and 1.5 subsurface of IOL, while special management areas do not have overlap with any IOL. Iksibota, this concludes our presentation on this section, and we're ready for questions. Kuya Namik?
Kuya Namik, Alan, is there any written questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, participants who just joined us this evening. I'm Alan Blair. I'm legal counsel to the Commission. The Commission asked for questions from participants such as yourself prior to the start of today's proceedings. We've received a number in writing from various people, and I'm going to read the questions that were submitted to the Commission, and the Commission staff will answer them. So you'll have an opportunity to understand what was on the minds of some of the other people coming into this hearing. This first session, I only have one question. It was a common issue or concern for people, and so it's not attributed to any one particular group. The question is, why is detailed information contained in the options and recommendations document but not in the draft Nunavut land use plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll just note that the draft plan attempts to present technical planning information in a concise, plain language document that includes the necessary maps, figures, and tables to understand how the draft plan proposes to manage land use. To make the draft plan as clear and user-friendly as possible, the options and recommendations document was created to record more detailed information that was considered and integrated into the plan. For example, the options and recommendations document contains a significant amount of information on individual migratory bird habitat sites that is not included in the draft plan, but this additional information is not necessarily needed to understand how the draft plan proposes to manage land use in each of these areas. While best efforts were made to include all of the information considered in the options and recommendations document, participants have noted some omissions. The Commission's consultation record is intended to be comprehensive and includes all comments and submissions considered when drafting and revising the plan. While the options and recommendations document only attempts to capture the most up-to-date information and not all historical information. Staff plans to update the options and recommendations document when the draft plan is revised. Although these regional public hearings are on the draft Nunavut land use plan, suggested revisions to the options and recommendations document are welcomed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Elishini lope gatana megama ta koni kage tilugit apekotista khaigusi ne na gatalogo amakina mga pe nakingaks me mga pe ukagatanya kusi apekotista khaigusi hiu ukauti pisimamagu tamaungalosi apekayatto gatanya kusi tema takwa ukalimakta gatatu apekotista bepota man apekayunaktusi apekayukaunaktu mau tahna Ape kutisa takapaleng man asianu ukalimaka tu na kanunis matatako. When we are ready. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into Chapter 2, which is on protecting and sustaining the environment, which proposes land use designations and recommendations for a variety of areas important to wildlife, including key migratory bird habitat sites, caribou habitat, polar bear denning areas, walrus haulouts, beluga calving grounds, and marine areas of importance. Nunavut provides key habitat sites for a variety of migratory bird species. Many nesting species are colonial and are found in high densities at geographically distinct sites during their time in the Arctic. The Canadian Wildlife Service identified a number of sites and made recommendations for each site based on criteria that included the percentage of the national population of birds that uses the site, the health of those populations, and the sensitivity of particular birds to disturbance. Specific details for each site are included in the options and recommendations document. The draft plan includes 27 key migratory bird habitat sites as protected areas with prohibited uses and setbacks. It also includes 10 key migratory bird habitat sites as special management areas where only setbacks would apply. And finally, there are an additional 9 key migratory bird habitat sites identified as valued ecosystem components where no prohibited uses or setbacks would apply. The prohibited uses and setbacks for each site vary and are described in Table 1 and Table 2 of the draft plan. Sites identified as valued ecosystem components can be found on Schedules B1 and B3. Some participants have expressed concern with prohibited uses being proposed within some key migratory bird habitat sites that have been identified as protected areas. The Commission welcomes input from all participants regarding key migratory bird habitat sites being identified as protected areas, including whether communities that are located near these sites support having prohibited uses included in the draft plan. There is also concern that the inclusion of these areas in the plan avoids the requirement to negotiate an Inuit impact and benefits agreement that may otherwise be required. That concludes our overview of migratory bird sites, and we'll stop for questions.
Thank you. Is there any question, Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've received 2 questions from participants on this particular topic. The questions, both of them came from NTI and the RIAs. The first question is, has the NPC included subsurface IOL parcels in the migratory bird protected area designations that are intended to be in marine designations? The question is specific to the following migratory bird protected areas. On the maps, number 2, Bathurst Elu Inlets, number 18, Belcher Island Polinias, number 19, Buchan Gulf, number 20, Cape Searle, Reed Bay, and number 33, Markham Bay.
Thank you very much. The Commission understands that there remain a number of instances where predominantly marine designations for key migratory bird habitat sites overlap with Inuit-owned land due to differences in the scale at which the key bird habitat sites are identified compared to the scale at which the Inuit-owned land parcels have been identified. In these cases, land use designations are not intended to apply to terrestrial areas, and this technical mapping issue can be resolved in a revised version of the draft plan. However, there may also be some instances where islands or coastal areas that provide important habitat for birds are intended to be included in the proposed designations. The Commission encourages the Government of Canada, who identified the areas, to clarify which sites are intended to include terrestrial portions and which sites should only include marine areas. The Commission welcomes submission on this issue from other participants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. The second question, can NPC provide evidence of community support for the new proposed migratory bird protected areas? The transcripts from the regional community meetings that took place in the fall of 2016 do not show that communities provided any feedback on the proposed designations.
Thank you again for the question. This issue has been discussed in regional meetings with communities held last fall, including during community-specific breakout groups. During those discussions, we heard no objections to the proposed designations raised by community representatives. During this public hearing, the Commission looks forward to hearing from all participants, including communities, regarding which aspects of the draft plan they do or do not support, determining the level of support for specific elements of the 2016 draft plan, such as proposed migratory bird protected areas, is a primary purpose of these public hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are the questions we received in this session.
Thank you. Apakudi sa taka taatma takon ng kalmak ta tatu misano. Kantuin na apakudi sa min kanay ko siluni titakallugo kiyo gumarnalo ni peyun na katanya may si tamani pinaso sa metemele katatluta man apakaya man na ko si kinaw mga pit na kingak sa mga pit apagata ko yun isa to kapalengin man asyano ka ito nang nasagata.
We now move on to an important issue that has been the subject of much discussion throughout this planning process. Caribou are an integral species in the northern ecosystem, providing food, supporting cultural heritage, and driving local economies. The relationship and historical dependence on caribou is a fundamental part of Inuit identity. When developing the draft plan, the NPC received detailed technical information and Inuit Koimaitohangit on caribou in Nunavut, including their seasonal ranges and sensitivities. Much of this information has been summarized for reference in the options and recommendations document. The draft plan proposes land use designations for mainland caribou only, because information on other herds has not been received in time for inclusion into the current draft plan, which was released in June 23, 2016. We would like to note that all information received from June 2016, including at the regional public hearings and after the hearings, will be before the commissioners for their consideration during the review and revision of the draft Nunavut land use plan. In the 2016 draft plan, designations for caribou habitat are identified by seasonal ranges. The first seasonal range to discuss is calving areas, which are of critical importance for maintaining healthy caribou populations and are generally acknowledged as areas where caribou are particularly vulnerable to disturbance. These areas are used by cows to bear their young and to form bonds in the first days of the lives of the caribou. The animals are very sensitive to disturbance at these times. The draft plan proposes that caribou calving areas be designated as protected areas with prohibited uses. These areas were defined based on caribou collaring data for the mainland herds. Post-calving areas are used by caribou for the nursing of calves. Disturbance in these areas can lead to higher calf mortality due to a reduced nursing time or cow-calf abandonment. Additionally, adults are affected by displacement from areas with high-quality vegetation. Post-calving areas have also been proposed as protected areas. Key access corridors are regularly used pathways essential for providing access to core calving areas. Key access corridors have been designated as protected areas. Locations where caribou regularly cross fresh water during their migration are unique areas of limited geographic extent where caribou are very sensitive to disturbance. Caribou freshwater crossings include a 10-kilometer buffer and have also been designated as protected areas. Some caribou herds migrate across the frozen sea ice to reach desired areas. Currently, the only information that has been submitted on caribou sea ice crossings is what is shaded in pink on the screen, which was provided by the government of Nunavut. The Somerset Prince of Wales subgroup of the prairie caribou relies on ice crossings between Somerset Island, Prince of Wales Island, the Boothia Peninsula. It is not known if particular times are important to these caribou than others. Shipping is restricted during the season of Ukiok, Upangaksak, and Upangak, which is from February 1 to August 14. The Bathurst subgroup of prairie caribou relies on ice crossings between Bathurst Island and the numerous small islands near the northwest portion of Bathurst Island. Shipping is restricted during Ukiak, Ukiok, Upangaksak, and Upangak, which is December 1 to July 31. Many of the written submissions received in advance of this hearing included comments on how the draft plan proposes to manage caribou habitat. Some participants expressed support for the proposed designations, and some provided alternative recommendations, such as including seasonal restrictions, special management areas rather than prohibited uses for caribou calving areas, post-calving areas, and freshwater crossings. 2, changing the boundaries of the caribou seasonal ranges by using a different analysis of caribou collaring data. 3, considering including sunset clauses when prohibitions in the plan would expire unless they were explicitly renewed. 4, considering including set periods when caribou habitat boundaries and regulations would be reassessed. 5, changing how important caribou areas that overlap with areas of high mineral potential are treated. 6, consider local and regional approaches and consider mobile protection measures in some regions for types of habitat. It is clear that participants have diverse recommendations and strong differences of opinion. Based on submissions provided thus far, in addition to the forthcoming presentations, the commissioners will make an informed decision on how to treat this issue. In this public hearing, it is immensely important that parties listen to one another and consider other points of view. We need to move away from positional arguments. Everyone here agrees that the importance of protecting caribou. The question is, how should the Nunavut Land Use Plan contribute to a logical, coordinated, and internally consistent caribou protection system? The commissioners will consider all of the information or written submissions that have been received, in addition to the oral presentations that will be heard this week, and during other regional public hearings before making an informed decision on how this issue should be addressed in a revised version of the draft plan. We're ready for questions.
Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Commission received 6 written questions on the topic of caribou. The first 2 questions came from NTI and the RIAs. Question 1, as documented by the Qikiqtani Wildlife Board in its January 2017 submission, there is existing IQ information on important caribou areas in the Qikiqtani. What steps will NPC take to create designations for significant caribou areas in the Qikiqtani region based on available information?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to note that all new information and comments received since the release of the 2016 draft plan at the 3 regional public hearings and in the final post-hearing written arguments, including IQ and scientific knowledge, will be considered by the commissioners when deciding on revisions to the draft plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question, can NPC provide the rationale for a 10-kilometer year-round buffer for caribou freshwater crossings? NPC's options and recommendation document does not mention or discuss the appropriate distance of buffers for caribou freshwater crossings or seasonal adjustments.
Thank you again. The 10-kilometer buffer was based on the review of different submissions received by the Commission on the proposed 2014 draft plan, as well as discussions during caribou-specific technical meetings. The submissions recommended protected area designations for freshwater crossings and a buffer zone around these areas. Recommendations varied from 10 kilometers to 80 kilometers for a buffer. However, the majority suggested 10 kilometers, including the Qikiqtani Wildlife Board and the Beverly Kamanayoak Caribou Management Board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The third question, as NERB has stated in its January 2017 submission to the NPC, environmental assessment examines effects on caribou one project at a time, and land use planning is intended to provide guidance on regional issues such as protection of caribou habitat. If protection of caribou habitat is not included in the final land use plan, do you expect the plan will have be effective in achieving its conservation objectives and goals?
Thank you again. When revising the draft plan, commissioners will consider how effectively all of the goals and objectives of the plan would be achieved. Various options for protecting caribou habitat in the plan have been suggested in written submissions received by the Commission and will probably be discussed by participants at these public hearings in greater detail. The commissioners will consider all of these options and their implications, including suggestions on how the plan should support and complement caribou protection measures that are taken by government, environmental assessment, and regulatory agencies, and others. As with all issues, the Commission welcomes input on these matters from all participants. Thank you.
The next two questions come from the Kavalik Inuit Association. Question, can NPC explain the rationalization for not including the application of mobile protection measures for use in caribou land management? NPC's options and recommendations document states that all three regional Inuit organizations support the application of mobile measures.
Thank you. The Commission acknowledges that determining the appropriate measures for protecting caribou while also recognizing other land use values and interests is an important issue where participants have a variety of strongly held views. Mobile protection measures are supported in some written submissions, but there is opposition to this approach in other submissions. The Commission has no position on these submissions at this time and has not reached any decision on the appropriate way to address this complex and important issue in the draft plan. The Commission invites participants to indicate in their submissions whether or not they support the approach to caribou protection in the draft plan and to provide reasons for their positions. Participants who prefer a different approach, such as mobile protection measures, are encouraged to provide details on these alternatives and explain how these other measures would be implemented and why they are preferred. Thank you.
The next question, can NPC explain the rationalization for including mapping of caribou seasonal ranges from a single source? The example being given is location data from collared cows provided by the government of Nunavut that does not integrate IQ or scientific survey and the collar data in a timely and transparent and collaborative manner.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to note that the Commission has sought information on caribou habitat as part of this planning process for many years. At the time the 2016 draft plan was prepared, the areas submitted by the government of Nunavut, based on collaring data, were the most widely accepted data set. It should also be noted that additional information regarding caribou water crossings that was submitted by various Qikiqtani HTOs in 2016 has been incorporated into the draft plan. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the last question in this area is from the Chamber of Mines. The question is, what specific scientific or traditional knowledge evidence can the Commission provide that industrial development has a deleterious effect on migratory barren ground caribou herds? That is, examples captured by scientific method or oral history that can be cited of an instance when caribou herd was caused to decline or otherwise was harmed due to industrial development. The response can be specific to all or part of the seasonal range of a herd.
Thank you again. As I previously noted, determining appropriate measures for protecting caribou while recognizing other land use values and interests is an important issue, and many participants have strongly held views. Over the years, the Commission has received many comments and submissions asking for significant land use restrictions to provide a precautionary approach to protecting caribou populations and habitat. On the other hand, it has also received submissions that the type and extent of proposed restrictions are not justified based on available scientific evidence and traditional knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are the questions we'd received.
Thank you.
If you wish to ask questions, please come up.
Okay.
Thank you. Lekababaw from Ibujibik. We hunt in Tujat or walrus. I would like to ask if, because the herd is decreasing in Tujat area, I would like protection measures done for that particular area. Brian Nalekia. Can you please elaborate more on his question? And I will try to respond to his question accordingly about the caribou herd. Right now, we are trying to work on the protection measures. At this time, it's not completed yet. I believe that was his question. If I did not respond accordingly, please come up again to ask your question again, or anyone else. Did you understand his response? Please ask questions. Takayasuk from Ibujibik, Nunavut. Ali is trying to say, because it's already been said before, because wildlife groups are told that in Tujat, Tujat, the Duline sites, where the Duline sites are, it's between Nunavut region. It's an island. There used to be abundance of caribou in that area, but there are no longer caribou. That is what he's trying to point out. And I have a question myself. The caribou in the Nunavut region, are you doing a similar thing? In Nunavut, they harvest a lot of male caribou in Nunavut region by caribou harvesters, because they go after the antlers, particularly for the antlers. And they hunt mainly the male caribou because of the caribou harvesters, not because of Inuit. Is it like that here in Nunavut too? The issue that we face.
Thank you very much. I understand the question was in regards to harvesting practices in Nunavut in relation to male or female caribou. And I would just note that the Nunavut Planning Commission is not responsible for the management of wildlife harvest. The commission deals with managing how land is used and the review of project proposals that are considered to be undertaken on the land. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, enemy. Yep. Kiuya mga pit. Digo.
To my understanding, his question is there's this island that had caribou. Now there's nothing. Is anybody gonna allow any more caribou on that island?
Let me say something. If any caribou would be placed in that area, that is the question. Nunavut Wildlife Management Board and Qikiqtani. It's responsibility by those two. The Planning Commission doesn't have this particular responsibility. NWMB and Qikiqtani would take action on this particular question that you posed, Ali. It cannot be dealt with here because it's responsibility of other organizations. Yes, that is the right response to his question that he's posed. Any other questions in regards to what was presented? It is now open for questions. I believe there aren't any. If we can move on to the next presentation.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into session 4, which covers the marine ecosystem. Much of the remainder of chapter 2 deals with factors relating to the marine ecosystem of Nunavut, and we will now move through each of these issues. Polar bear denning areas are important coastal habitats where females give birth and feed their cubs. The majority of dens are located on land within 50 kilometers of the coast, although multi-year ice is sometimes used. In the 2014 draft plan, polar bear denning areas were proposed as special management areas with no prohibited uses or specific conditions. The terms for this 2014 designation noted that the Nunavut Planning Commission may refer a project proposal to the Nunavut Impact Review Board for screening where there were cumulative impacts concerns. In the 2016 draft plan, a similar framework is proposed, although it is structured as a valued ecosystem component. Polar bear denning areas are proposed as a mixed-use designation and are presented as areas of a known valued component on Schedule B. If a proponent proposes to conduct activities in an area known to be or have been used for polar bear denning, they will be notified at the outset that their activities may be referred to the Impact Review Board because of cumulative impacts concerns. For polar bear denning areas, the end result of the 2014 and 2016 versions of the draft plan is the same, but the approach has been updated to follow the same structure as the rest of the 2016 draft. Some participants have expressed concern with the lack of protection provided for polar bear denning areas in the 2016 draft plan. It should be noted that in order to designate polar bear denning areas as protected areas or special management areas, there would need to be specific prohibited uses or conditions that could be assessed by the Nunavut Planning Commission when reviewing project proposals for conformity with the plan. The Atlantic walrus plays a major role in the ecological function of the marine ecosystem and is an important part of the traditional subsistence economy for Inuit. In the summer, walrus congregate on low, rocky shores where they temporarily leave the water. This action is known as a haul-out. there are several known walrus haul-out areas in the Nunavut settlement area. In the 2016 draft plan, walrus haul-outs have been proposed as protected areas with a setback of 5 kilometers for all non-traditional uses. Habitat requirements for beluga whales are seasonal, and they frequently return to the same locations each year. In the summer, belugas concentrate in shallow estuaries and coastline environments, and at this time, they are sensitive to disturbance. The calving season in Hudson Bay is June and July, which translates to the Inuit season of Upingak. Beluga calving grounds are assigned a special management area designation and include a seasonal shipping restriction during Upingak. Please note that the draft plan mistakenly says Auyuk for this season. Sharon?
Plinias are areas of persistent open water surrounded by sea ice. Plinias are important areas for wildlife as they provide access between the ocean and the atmosphere for many species that are nutrient-rich, biologically productive areas. 2 plinias have attracted the most public concern because of their importance to a wide variety of value ecosystem components. The Lancaster Sound Plinia is an essential component of the proposed National Marine Conservation Area. The North Water Plinia, also located between Ellesmere Island and Greenland, is the most northerly Plinia in North America and is essential to the survival of several marine mammals species in the high Arctic. Ice breaking in or through plinias can have negative impacts on their structure or other characteristics. In the draft plan, the Lancaster Sound and North Water plinias have been proposed as special management areas with seasonal restrictions on shipping during December to June. Other plinias within the Nunavut settlement area are presented on Schedule B as valued ecosystem components. Flow edges. Flow edges are lines of thick land-fixed ice meeting fully or partially in open water. Flow edges are used by wildlife and hunters and are ecologically important. Depending on the season, ice breaking can prevent the formation of flow edges by structurally damaging the ice pack or can cause early breakup. Flow edges have been proposed as areas of mixed use with information on valued ecosystem components to guide regulators whenever assessing project proposals within their known location. Small populations of landlocked Arctic cod have been identified in 3 coastal saltwater lakes on the Cumberland Peninsula, southeastern Baffin, and are identified as value ecosystem components. Char areas of abundance identified by DFO, including both marine and freshwater systems, are important to the food source and are identified as valued socioeconomic components. And finally, this chapter includes a recommendation for climate change proponents and regulators give reasonable consideration to maximizing contribution to the climate change when activities are to be carried out in the Nunavut settlement area. That's the end of section 4, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before you go, Alan, maybe you can ask first. Alan?
Alan, apirikaron natutika. Ubalo. You can ask a question first. About walrus. I will speak about walrus, since it was mentioned. It has to be carefully dealt with because I know that our ancestors did not deal with it properly, and I'm sorry to say that, but that was the case. It wasn't on purpose, or it wasn't intentional. And I know that what I'm trying to say is because when I work on walrus, I work on it for a long time, and I travel by a large boat. And for many years, I have been working on this in a very effective way. Although I'm not against other great hunters, this has to do with walrus. The walrus, when they are in their hollows, they shouldn't be harvested. They shouldn't be hunted when they're in their hollows because they're afraid to be in unclean areas. And you shouldn't butcher anything while they're in their hollows because they want to be in a clean area because that's where they rest. The walrus rest in their hollows, so they shouldn't be hunted while they're there. And once they go in the water, then you can, if you harvest a walrus, you can butcher it in another area, not in their hollows. And do not leave anything in their hollows because that's where they rest. If you don't do that, if you do killings in their hollows, they will no longer want to be in that particular area where they are resting. They will no longer want to be in that specific area. So please do not hunt while they're in their hollows and not butcher any harvested animals in their hollows. Because our ancestors hunted walruses for a long time. And for example, if we were to go out hunting and it's a nice day, we would come back the next day with harvest. So I would really want you to carefully look after the walrus, treat them properly. Thank you. I believe that is not a question, it's mainly a comment. In regards to what was presented, after Alan reads the questions, then further questions can be received.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this section, we received 2 questions, both from NTI and the RIAs. Question 1, can NPC further elaborate on the reasoning for not establishing special management area for polar bear denning areas with terms and conditions to protect the denning sites? Can NPC explain why the Government of Nunavut's submission in 2016 and the joint submission of NTI and the RIAs also in 2016 regarding the establishment of a special management area for polar bear denning areas were omitted from the options and recommendations document?
Thank you very much. In order to designate polar bear denning areas as protected areas or special management areas, there would need to be prohibited uses or specific conditions that could be assessed by the NPC when reviewing project proposals for conformity with the plan. The conditions that were recommended to the Commission for polar bear denning areas typically involved procedural matters requiring certain departments to be consulted or notified, and these types of procedural conditions were generally not included in the draft plan due to the challenges of implementing them through an NPC conformity determination. The omission of the Government of Nunavut and the joint NTI-RIA submissions regarding polar bear from the options and recommendations document is an error that can be addressed in a revised version of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And the last question in this section, can NPC provide the rationalization for excluding all vessels at any time of the year within 5 kilometers of walrus haul-out protected areas? More information is needed on the rationalization for a year-round prohibition of vessels in the options and recommendations document.
Thank you again. The proposed restriction in the draft plan was included based on comments received from participants regarding the importance and vulnerability of walrus haulouts. Some participants recommended setbacks of up to 20 kilometers and for the restriction to be year-round. As with other issues in the draft plan, the Commission welcomes input on the need for restrictions near walrus haulouts, including the appropriate timing of such restrictions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Time over lemon. Brian, pick up a leg on the muted.
Parks and Conservation. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 includes discussions relating to preservation of natural and cultural heritage. While land use plans developed by the Commission do not apply within established parks and marine conservation areas, the draft plan may support their identification and establishment. Natila, ubidi tusangi mo. National parks awaiting full establishment. Ward Hunt Island have been proposed to protect areas until the process has been fully completed. Tema, namalak pa. Okay, kayo sinak po. National parks awaiting full establishment, Ward Hunt Island, have been proposed as protected areas until the process has been fully completed. Territorial parks that are awaiting full establishment, highlighted in green, or have been proposed, have been designated in the interim as protected areas. Please note that most of these sites are difficult to see on the scale because they are too small. The proposed Lancaster Sound National Marine Conservation Area is also identified in the draft plan as a protected area. The Commission has jurisdiction within established conservation areas as defined under Article 9 of the Nunavut Agreement. These conservation areas include the Thelon Wildlife Sanctuary, the Migratory Bird Sanctuaries, National Wildlife Areas, National Historic Sites, Territorial Historic Sites. These areas are all proposed to be designated as protected areas in the draft plan. Some participants have recommended that the draft plan should not provide additional prohibitions, terms, or conditions within migratory bird sanctuaries and national wildlife areas. The NPC welcomes input on this issue from participants during the hearing. The Canadian Heritage River System is Canada's national river conservation program. It promotes, protects, and enhances Canada's river heritage and ensures that Canada's leading rivers are managed in a sustainable manner. There are 3 designated Canadian heritage rivers within the Nunavut settlement area. Each has its own management plan. They're the Thilan, Kazan, and Soper River. Portions of the Soper River watershed outside the Qikiqtani Territorial Park are designated as protected areas. Since the Soper River is within the Territorial Park, these areas are also protected based on Territorial Park Protected Area designations. Some participants have recommended in written submissions that the Soper River be considered as a special management area instead of a protected area. Submissions also mentioned that consideration should be given to assigning and complementary designation to nominated rivers, including the Coppermine River. We're ready for questions from this point on this topic or issue.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We received one question in this section from NTI, the RIAs. Can NPC provide evidence of community support for the historic site protected areas? The transcripts of the regional community meetings that took place in the fall of 2016 do not show that communities provided any feedback on the proposed designations.
Thank you very much. These designations were discussed in regional meetings with communities held last fall, including during community-specific breakout groups. We heard no objections to the proposed designations raised by community representatives during these meetings. As previously noted, an important purpose of these public hearings is to hear from all participants, including communities, regarding which aspects of the draft plan they do or do not support. If communities have feedback on the proposed designations for the historic sites protected areas, the Commission hopes that it is included in their presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Apakodisata ka tasko kalimata o tato misano. Pitaka palingimat kaya sigatun. Sharon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Section 6 of our presentation is on Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is about building healthy communities, and topics covered are meant to improve the health and well-being of Nunavut. Community areas of interest are places that communities have identified as being important and where they want restrictions on development. There are both marine and terrestrial community areas of interest. Community areas of interest are assigned a protected area land use designation and are shown on Schedule A. Other areas are identified as valued components on Schedule B or are assigned a mixed-use designation. Some participants have questioned why certain areas are not identified as protected areas in the draft plan. In general, the manner in which areas are identified in the draft plan depends both on the clarity of the community representatives on how they would like to see those areas treated, and the clarity with which the areas are identified. Generally, a well-defined area with many components on certain proposed regulations are more likely to be in Schedule A. Areas that have not been clearly defined and/or where the Nunavut Planning Commission has not received detailed explanations for proposed prohibited uses or conditions will more likely be on Schedule B. In recent written submissions, some communities identified new areas, and the Commission requests that during their oral presentations during this hearing, that they talk a bit about the areas they have suggested, how and why communities have selected them, and any sort of detail on the sort of protection that you are looking for, such as what land uses would not be appropriate and whether restrictions should be seasonal or all year long. Sorry, tongue-tied. During consultations, communities identified a large number of areas that are important for a variety of reasons. The draft plan identifies these areas as community priorities and values and summarizes them in Table 3 and 4 as valued ecosystem components and valued socioeconomic components. A digital database of these comments would inform proponents, the Commission, and other regulatory authorities about issues that are important to communities so they can be considered during the design and the review of project proposals. The Commission has also been working since 2003 towards mapping how Nunavut use land through individual use and occupancy interviews. The draft plan identifies community land uses as valued ecosystem components and valued socioeconomic components and summarizes them in Table 5. Areas of equal use and occupancy are Hudson Bay Islands, where certain lands are jointly owned and managed by the Inuit of Northern Quebec, Nunavut, as represented by Makabik, and the Inuit of Nunavut, represented by NTI. These areas are designated as protected areas because they were identified by residents of multiple communities in Nunavut and Nunavik as important for a variety of environmental and cultural reasons. There are differences of opinion amongst some participants if a protected area designation is appropriate for these areas at this time, and we encourage the participants involved to elaborate on the recommendations, so each of you, during your presentations.
Energy generation. Energy generation in Nunavut is almost completely dependent on the burning of fossil fuels. There is a need to diversify the energy supply to include alternative energy sources. 2 areas with hydroelectric development potential have been identified outside Baker Lake and one outside Iqaluit. In the draft plan, the identified sites are assigned a special management area designation with prohibition of all incompatible development within a 100-meter buffer. Some communities have told us verbally that perhaps other potential hydroelectricity locations could be protected in the same way. We respectfully request that any communities that would like to do this to please submit the proposed location of the potential hydroelectricity site so that it can be considered by the commissioners. There's also been some discussion in the comments to the Nunavut Planning Commission on building electricity lines in Nunavut. This will be discussed more when we get to the linear infrastructure later in this presentation. Community drinking water. Clean drinking water supplies are an essential component of healthy communities. The Commission has identified the watersheds for all current water sources based on the best available information. As new information becomes available on the identification of future and alternative water sources, it will be considered. All water community water supply watersheds have been proposed as protected areas, with the exception of the Qikiqtani and Baker Lake watershed. Qikiqtani and Baker Lake community watersheds have been identified as valued ecosystem and socioeconomic components due to their large size. It should be noted that not all of the intended community drinking water supplies are shown on Schedule A. This is an error in the 2016 draft plan. All parties wishing to see changes in the proposed protection of community watersheds are encouraged to share their comments during their presentation later in this public hearing.
This map shows some of the major waste sites in Nunavut that are of concern for public health and safety. However, there are hundreds of other waste sites not depicted. Contaminated sites are assigned a special management area land use designation. Once remediated, these sites would be open for future uses. However, drilling, camps, and large landing pads on landfills would not be allowed. Under Section 11.9 of the Nunavut Agreement, the Nunavut Planning Commission is tasked with the prioritization of the cleanup of all waste and contaminated sites in Nunavut. There is no single master list of contaminated sites in Nunavut, though, as each agency maintains separate lists of cleanup programs. The NPC previously developed a process, which is included in Annex D of the draft plan, to identify and develop a list of priority sites for remediation, which has been carried forward to the draft plan to enable continued discussion. There are a number of establishments in the Nunavut settlement area that contribute to national security. These include North Warning System sites, the Canadian Armed Forces Station of Alert, Eureka, Nanisivik, as well as the High Arctic Data Communication System. These sites are assigned special management area land use designations in the draft plan that prohibit incompatible uses. And that finishes our overview of this chapter, and we'll now stop for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 questions previously submitted, all from NTI and the RIAs. Question 1, can the NPC provide a further explanation for not including Corbett Inlet and the 2 Nauyat areas as community areas of interest? Corbett Inlet was proposed within the Qikiqtani Wildlife Board submission, and the Nauyat areas were proposed by the Qikiqtani HTO.
Thank you very much. Corbett Inlet was included in the draft plan as a valued component rather than as a protected area due to the relatively limited information on the importance of the areas available at the time of drafting. As noted in the options and recommendations document, the Nauyat areas were not included in the draft plan due to the large size of the areas and the lack of suggested policy direction. The Commission looks forward to hearing more about these areas during regional public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question, can NPC explain the rationalization for proposing that areas of equal use and occupancy be designated as protected areas when Makivik Corporation, NTI, and QIA have indicated that this designation is premature and that it is unclear whether this designation is supported by the communities? Can the options and recommendations document be updated to include the designation preferences and reasoning of Makivik Corporation, NTI, and QIA?
Thank you once again. The recommendation of Makivik, NTI, and QIA that the proposed designation is premature is noted in the options and recommendations document. However, the proposed protected area designation was included in the draft plan for consideration because the areas were identified by residents of multiple communities in Nunavut and Nunavik as important for a variety of environmental and cultural reasons that are included in the Commission's summaries of community meetings on the draft plan from 2013. The Commission looks forward to any comments participants may have with regards to these designations during these public hearings. Thank you.
The last question, Mr. Chair. For waste sites and the North Warning System sites described as number 83-98 and 106-135 of Schedule A, Table 1, that specify a reduction in the land area once sites are cleaned up or remediated, what does NPC propose as the process to reduce the size of these special management areas once sites are deemed to be cleaned up? Will government departments responsible for sites be requested to inform NPC and other interested parties in writing when the sites are cleaned up?
Thank you once again. The Commission recognizes that the draft plan does not provide a specific process for reducing the size of these special management areas after they are remediated. Participants are encouraged to provide comments and recommendations on this matter, and commissioners will take this feedback into account when making their decisions on plan revisions following the public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Apakurisa tahaka tasumisan. Pitakapalengimat. I think Jonathan, he.
Chapter 5 of the 2016 draft plan is about encouraging sustainable economic development. In line with the NPC's 2007 goals and objectives, mineral development, oil and gas, commercial fisheries, transportation and communication services, and marine shipping and on-ice transportation corridors are all examples of potential development opportunities in the territory.
Mineral potential. The Nunavut Planning Commission recognizes the importance of the mineral industry to Nunavut's economy. The maps on the screen illustrate the known areas of mineral potential throughout the territory as of June 23, 2016. Areas of high mineral potential have been identified based on a number of factors, including the location of mineral occurrence, historical mineral tenure, the locations of past and present mines, and projects currently in the review and permitting stages. Areas of known mineral potential are illustrated on Schedule B maps, illustrated on Schedule B maps as value socioeconomic components. Since the release of the draft plan in June 2016, new information on areas of mineral potential have been submitted to the Commission. Some submissions have requested more flexibility in protection of ecological values where they are in the same place as mineral potential. This is a challenging area of discussion, and the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan has suggested strategic environmental assessment take place in some areas where there are multiple values, specifically in the mainland West Qikiqtani, South Central Kavalik, and the Melville Peninsula Comedy Bay area.
A strategic environmental assessment is a process and a planning tool that considers several potential projects together as a whole in advance of development. Strategic environmental assessments should be undertaken proactively when a number of independent projects are known or reasonably expected in a certain geographic area, and the geographic area has one or more valued components which could reasonably be expected to experience cumulative effects as additional projects become operational. The 2016 draft plan includes a recommendation that funding be provided for the Nunavut Planning Commission and the Nunavut Impact Review Board working together to conduct strategic environmental assessments in some parts of Nunavut where there is high mineral potential. Nunavut also has proven oil and gas potential, notably in the Sverdrup Basin, where there are several existing significant discovery licenses. Baffin Bay also has potential, but the area remains relatively unexplored. The map you see on the screen identifies significant discovery licenses in the Sverdrup Basin and are on Schedule B3 as valued socioeconomic components. The commercial fishing industry is important to a diversified and sustainable economy. Commercial fisheries are an emerging sector in Nunavut's economy, with turbot, shrimp, and char currently being harvested. While there are many areas of the territory that currently support commercial fisheries, the Cumberland Sound Turbot Management Area has been identified by participants as a particularly important fishing area for the community of Pangnirtung. This area is designated as a special management area in the draft plan. Other turbot areas of abundance, as well as char areas of abundance, have been identified as valued socioeconomic components. And we'll stop there and take questions on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Commission didn't receive any pre-written questions in this topic area.
Okay, thank you.
Come over and ask your question, please. State your name and your community, please. Kuya Namik Atami, Saluit. I have one question that I'm concerned about. The exploration mineral areas. Once they start exploring, they go into many areas, including seismic testing. Will that happen as well in your region? Ibili?
Inutitu nalonere kanermabiu balokalona. Can you please reiterate what you said? I believe it wasn't clear. My apologies. I'm not sure what it is in Inuktitut. Is
this commission is able to stop or do something about the seismic testing in the area where it's hurting all the animals, and people don't seem to agree with their methods of looking for minerals in oil and gas. Thank you.
Jonathan? Thank you very much for the question, and apologies for any confusion. I just note that the issue of seismic testing is something that the draft plan can manage. So there are areas identified in the draft plan where oil and gas exploration and production would be prohibited, including in the areas of equal use and occupancy in the proposed protected area designation that's been included. So that is something that the plan is able to do, and we're looking for feedback on areas where it may be appropriate or may be inappropriate through these meetings. Thank you very much.
You want to share?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Adami, for the question. So today we're running through the overview. When you have the opportunity to do your community presentations, you can speak to this and give the Commission suggestions of how you would want this managed. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma, apa ko sa takanakat? Unika kaya ko tatamisan. Pitaka palengiman. Kaya siya kanto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next section is Section 8, Terrestrial Linear Infrastructure. One of the Commission's objectives is to take into account the development and maintenance of territorial and community infrastructure outside municipal boundaries, including transportation infrastructure. In the draft plan, linear infrastructure refers to roads, railways, telephone lines, and other built features that run a long distance. Because these long features can pass through many different areas and increase access, they can significantly impact wildlife, water, people, communities, and economies.
Linear infrastructure is a key element in accessing the natural resources of the Nunavut settlement area and encouraging economic development. Due to the scale of the region, environmental factors, and ever-changing economic circumstances, there is considerable uncertainty in predicting the most appropriate location for linear infrastructure. To support the identification of the most suitable route and mode of linear infrastructure for a given project, the draft plan proposes to ask proponents to consider big questions early in the process. The draft plan includes 2 preliminary assessments to be done by the NPC for all-season linear infrastructure. First, an alternatives assessment on routing, and secondly, an alternatives assessment on the modality or type of infrastructure. The factors considered in these 2 assessments are presented in Annex A1 and A2 at the back of the draft plan. The 2 assessments are intended to encourage consideration of all options before a linear infrastructure project enters the regulatory system. It should also be noted that these assessments would be at a general planning level, and that the Nunavut Impact Review Board would still conduct a more detailed impact assessment. The assessments are designed essentially as thought exercises, laying out a framework of the high-level questions that need to be made before major investments in the impact assessment of infrastructure are made.
In addition to the alternative assessment just discussed, the draft plan proposes that all highways and railways would require a plan amendment in order to provide the opportunity for nearby and connecting communities to be consulted prior to the Commission's approval of such proposed infrastructure. This would be consistent with the two currently approved plans for the North Baffin and the Keewatin regions, which require a plan amendment for the development of linear infrastructure corridors. Many participants have expressed concern with this requirement for highways and railways and have recommended that it be removed.
The draft plan also distinguishes between proposed linear infrastructure, which would be grandfathered because they are already approved or in an impact assessment process, and speculative linear infrastructure, for which a complete project proposal has not been submitted to the Commission for conformity determination, and therefore would be subject to the Nunavut Land Use Plan after its adoption. This map shows in red the roads that have already been built in Nunavut. Purple lines show where roads have been proposed and are presently either approved for construction or in environmental assessment or water licensing stages. This means that unless the proposal is significantly altered, these roads would be exempt from the Nunavut Land Use Plan. The beige lines show speculative roads that have not entered the regulatory process. Speculative linear infrastructure is shown on Schedule B as a valued component.
Participants have provided extensive comments on this section of the draft plan. While some participants support the current approach in the 2016 draft plan on this issue, others have made a variety of recommendations, including inclusion of the speculative Manitoba-Kivalliq Road and Hydro Corridor, as well as the Grays Bay Road Corridor on Schedule A of the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan as a special management area. Removal of the requirement for all highway and railway proposals to undergo a plan amendment. And removal of the requirement to include a robust alternative assessment for any all-season linear infrastructure. Input from all participants during their presentations is encouraged on this important issue. We're ready for questions.
Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission staff received 2 questions from participants. The first one is from NTI in the RIAs. Question: can NPC explain the rationalization for not creating special management areas for linear infrastructure corridors? Additionally, why does the options and recommendation document at section 5.5 and 5.5.1 on transportation corridors not reflect submissions from the Qikiqtani Inuit Association, NTI, the Government of Canada, and other participants regarding linear infrastructure?
Thank you very much. I would first like to note that best efforts were made to include in the options and recommendations document all of the information considered, and thank you for noting this omission. When preparing the 2016 draft plan, a range of options were considered and a potential option was included for linear infrastructure. This option includes criteria for linear infrastructure and recognizes that proposals for infrastructure are currently at different stages of preparation. This particular corridor has not yet been formally submitted to the regulatory system, and its potential route crosses important caribou habitats that are designated as protected areas in the draft plan. The Commission encourages participants to indicate how they think linear infrastructure should be dealt with in the plan and what approach they would prefer. Thank you.
Thank you. The second and last question in this area is from the Kavalak Inuit Association. Question: can NPC explain the rationalization for not accepting the answers to the 6 questions under Annex A1? The answers clearly demonstrate that the route for the proposed Nunavut-Manitoba Road Hydro Linear Infrastructure Corridor has met the criteria in these 6 questions.
Thank you again. As previously noted, a project proposal for the Qikiqtani to Manitoba Road and Hydro Corridor has not yet been submitted and has not been reviewed against the proposed criteria in the draft plan. The Commission looks forward to hearing participants' views on this potential corridor, and the Commissioners will determine how it will be treated in a revised draft plan following these regional public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Apakot sa takaka takwa unikata watatu misan. Pitakapalengimat, Brian.
Marine shipping. Marine shipping in Nunavut has for many years been essentially either community supply or periodic ship traveling to mines, or the occasional adventurer. Over the last decade or two, the extent and the thickness of sea ice in Nunavut has reduced considerably, and there may be new seaways opening. The last few years have seen large-sized cruise ships entering Nunavut. The approach to marine shipping in the Nunavut Land Use Plan requires a balance between the intent of the Nunavut Agreement, which states that land use planning in Nunavut applies to the marine areas of the Nunavut settlement area, and the fact that the Government of Canada has almost sole jurisdiction in this area. The marine laws of Canada are designed to prevent pollution and prevent accidents through a number of acts and regulations. The NPC has been informed that a ship passage through Nunavut is outside of its jurisdiction, and that the Nunavut Land Use Plan can only apply if a ship stops in Nunavut. It should also be noted that the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act provides exemptions for activities carried out in response to an emergency. As previously discussed, Chapters 2 to 4 of the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan include restrictions on shipping for ecological reasons, including setbacks from certain areas important to nesting birds, walrus haulouts, and beluga calving areas, to seasonal restrictions for caribou sea ice crossings and 2 important polynyas, and year-round shipping or year-round prohibitions on shipping in 2 marine community areas of interest. The draft plan also includes recommendations to the Government of Canada to use appropriate tools or regulations to support the goals of ecological marine setbacks included in the draft plan. Prioritize the development of up-to-date and accurate nautical charts in the areas along the Northwest Passage, and for community marine approaches that are 50 meters deep or less. Work collaboratively to develop a better understanding of alternative routes for ships, the impacts of ships traveling in convoys, and standardized best procedures for spill containment in loose ice conditions. A number of additional marine areas are also designated as protected areas for special management areas or are identified as valued components, but do not have restrictions on shipping. In winter, there is a concern that an untimely icebreaker passage could leave on ice hunters or travelers stranded or put them in danger. The draft plan includes special management areas for on-ice travel routes that have been described by Fisheries and Oceans Canada since 1999 in their Marine Environmental Handbook. Any proposal for winter shipping would need to present an ice bridging plan that addresses the factors included in Annex B. The issue of international shipping through Nunavut waters raises important practical and symbolic concerns for Canadians and for Nunavut in particular. It also creates significant diplomatic challenges for the Government of Canada as it asserts sovereignty in this area through international law and in its relations with other countries that claim a right of access through the Northwest Passage. Several participants are concerned that shipping restrictions could render large areas inaccessible, as well as with how the 2016 draft plan addresses shipping in general. It has been noted that protocols on marine shipping already exist and are enforced by the federal organizations. In addition, there are concerns regarding the implications for international relations on sovereignty. Some participants have requested that the marine shipping section be entirely restructured, terms defined, or even excluded from the first generation plan. There is also support for certain protections on important marine areas, most of which are seasonal from participants. Participants are also concerned that emergency response, national defense, and community resupply would be negatively affected by shipping restrictions. It should be noted that the Nunavut Land Use Plan would not apply in emergency situations. Existing community resupply would not be affected by shipping prohibitions in the Nunavut Land Use Plan because they would be grandfathered.
Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can report both that there are no questions on this section and also that we've just hit the 13th hour since we started this morning.
Thanks for the reminder. Apa ko sa taka ta cuma misano unika yo tatu. Pitaka pelengmat. Brian.
Implementation, Chapter 6. Since the enactment of the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act, the NPC is the gatekeeper of the territory's regulatory system. All proposals for development, works, and activities must be submitted to the Commission for review. Chapter 6 deals with implementation. The implementation strategy of the land use plan is part of the day-to-day activity of the NPC and is guided by the Nunavut Agreement and the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act. We will go over 6 functions in the implementation strategy. These 6 are discussed at high level, but the detail has been laid out in the internal procedures of the Nunavut Planning Commission. These procedures are available online. However, we will be going through each one now. 1, conformity determinations. All project proposals must first be submitted to the NPC to determine whether they conform to to the requirements of the plan before any other regulatory authority can consider them. This is sometimes referred to as a conformity determination. If the proposed use is not prohibited and complies with all applicable conditions and additional information requirements, it will conform to the Nunavut Land Use Plan. The NPC will then forward the proposal to either the Nunavut Impact Review Board for screening or to the responsible regulatory authority for consideration. Schedule 12.1 of the Nunavut Agreement identifies the types of project proposals that do not require screening by NERB. If the proposed use is prohibited or is unable to comply with relevant conditions, it will not be in conformity with the plan. If a project proposal does not conform, the proponent can either change it so that it is consistent with the plan, request a plan amendment, a minor variance, or a ministerial exemption. 2, cumulative impacts. The NPC also has authority to refer project proposals that normally would not require screening to NERB for screening on the basis of cumulative impact concerns. Cumulative impacts may result from the interaction of project proposals' expected impacts with those of other projects. Criteria for cumulative impact referrals currently exist in an internal procedure of the Commission, but some participants have recommended that clear criteria be included in the draft plan. 3, go ahead, John, sorry.
Plan amendments will be considered for major changes to the plan, including formal updates to the content of the plan, changes to uses considered to conform or are listed as prohibited under land use designations, or changes to the application of conditions and information on valued components. Amendments to the plan may be proposed at any time. In cases where there is strong public concern over a certain matter, the Commission may indicate that a public hearing could be appropriate and request appropriate funding from the federal government. Minor variances may allow for some flexibility to the conditions of the plan. If a project proposal does not conform to an applicable land use plan, it may be eligible for a minor variance, which could allow a deviation from certain conditions of the plan. The draft plan currently limits consideration of minor variances to conditions that include setbacks or seasonal restrictions. While a minor variance would require a public review, this process would be less rigorous than that for a plan amendment process. Some participants have recommended that minor variances be considered for prohibited uses as well as conditions. If a project proposal does not conform to an applicable plan, the proponent may apply for a ministerial exemption, which is a decision from the minister to exempt a project proposal from the requirements of a plan. A periodic review is a public review of the entire land use plan. A specific schedule for periodic reviews is not set in legislation. However, the draft plan proposes to consider a full review every 5 years. Many participants are concerned with the lack of certainty on the time frame for a periodic review, and the input that has been received on this matter will be given full consideration. Thank you.
Existing rights. Projects that are being carried out or were approved prior to the approval of the plan have existing rights. They are not subject to the requirements of the plan. This is sometimes times referred to as grandfathering. However, NUPA requires a project proposal to be submitted to the Commission if there is a significant modification to the project with existing rights. A significant modification may include a change in scale or intensity of the project proposal, new or modified activities that were not included in the original project proposal, or a change in location, type of land use, or season of work. In the mining sector, the notion of grandfathering is complex. As projects move through a number of fairly distinct stages, the draft plan identifies 7 distinct stages of mineral exploration and development: prospecting, staking, exploration, advanced exploration, mining, closure, remediation, and monitoring. The draft plan proposes that a transition from one stage of mineral exploration and development to another may require a new conformity determination. For example, if an exploration camp is to be expanded to an advanced exploration camp, or if the company wants to develop a mine near an existing advanced exploration camp, the use of the word may in the plan concerned a number of participants because of the lack of certainty. Some written submissions identified support for this section as it's currently written in the 2016 draft. However, other participants provided alternative recommendations, including 1, projects with existing rights should be grandfathered for existing and future activities. 2, consider creating permanent uses within protected areas that would allow uses to continue that would otherwise be prohibited, while terms and conditions could still apply. 3, undertake additional discussion and a legal review on existing rights before establishing a mutually accepted policy. That concludes the section, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this section, we have 2 questions which have been submitted. The first question comes from NTI and the RIAs. Question: can the NPC assure participants that the Nunavut Land Use Plan will include a commitment by the NPC to complete a public review of the plan between 5 to 10 years from the time the plan comes first into effect? If not, what are NPC's concerns regarding providing this commitment?
Thank you very much. I'll just note that commissioners will be giving full consideration to the input provided in written submissions and during the 3 regional public hearings regarding periodic reviews, and will make an informed decision based on that input. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. The second question: according to NPC's internal procedures, there will be a periodic assessment of factors for determining whether there is a need to conduct a periodic review of the land use plan. Can you explain what type, amount, and nature of new data on caribou will be required for assessing whether a review should be conducted? What process will NPC use to acquire that data, and will it be actively sought?
Thank you once again. There are no thresholds established for the quality or quantity of new information that would trigger a plan amendment or a periodic review. It should be noted that anyone can request a plan amendment at any time and can provide information and arguments to support their request. Commissioners will consider submissions on the issue of periodic review of the land use plan and welcome suggestions on aspects of internal procedures that participants feel should be incorporated into the plan, and on the appropriate roles of NPC, government, and others in acquiring data on caribou. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Apakod sa taka unikaya o tato misan. Pitaka playing Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Section 11, conclusion. The Nunavut Planning Commission suggests that while discussion on chapters 1 and 6 will remain focused on principles and concepts, it would assist if comments relating to chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5 can focus on 2 questions. The first question is whether the boundaries shown on the maps are the best. If your community or agency feels there is a community area of interest missing, or a polar bear area that is too big, or a char area that is too small, or any other factor, please tell us or everyone your suggestions. How would you create, delete, or change any one of the sites in the Nunavut land use plan, and why? The second question relates to the planning toolbox. We have talked about a number of tools that are used in the plan, including prohibitions, seasonal restrictions, conditions, values, and strategic environmental assessments. The Nunavut Land Use Plan has basically divided up Nunavut and suggests a certain mix of different types of planning tools in each of the different parts of Nunavut. The Commission welcomes and encourages suggestions from all parties on different mixes of planning tools in different areas and with your reasons. Before we go into the presentation tomorrow, the Nunavut Planning Commission wanted to address these topics and present the conflicting views. The draft plan includes proposed land use designations for your review based on comments and submissions received. Nunavut is a large territory with many communities, organizations, industry, government, and people. No land use decision is going to be perfect. Obviously, opposing viewpoints on specific issues are going to happen. There will likely be compromises and trade-offs. The commissioners want to hear from you. They want to know what your concerns are, how your concerns can be addressed, and how they fit into the final recommendations for the land use plan. For the delegates that came late, we apologize that you've had to sit here for so long, but we had to redo this presentation, so we thank you for your patience. I know you're all tired. And to the commission staff and all the people who stayed, I thank the staff for the extra long day today and appreciate it. So we'll resume our schedule tomorrow as the agenda states. And the commission is looking forward to all of your presentations. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the staff presentation for this evening.
Thank you. Alan, is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought Sharon wrapped it up quite nicely there. I think any of the topics here will be covered again through the course of the next several days.
Any questions from the participants on tonight's discussions? Appears there's none. So this concludes our evening session, and we will resume the sitting tomorrow at 9 if all goes well. We start at 9. Thank you all.